Hello, all you beautiful souls. I appreciate you listening to my sound healing, and I hope that it's brought great peace to you, great insight. And this is new for me, so bear with me. I'm not normally one that just speaks, but I feel that, that's a great disservice to humanity because not everybody feels my sound healing, and not everybody takes it as something that's special for them, and I understand that. And so I'd like to go on a deeper level, and yet at the same time I'd like to express something that may be more of an understanding. So I'll get right into it. So recently I had an encounter with a dear friend of mine. His sister came over and she was very distraught about a breakup with someone that she had been with for a really long time. And I sat and I spoke with her, and a lot of what I said was very revealing. And a lot of what she said back to me was, this is too much, it's too much. And I understood that because that can be very intense. But what that really said was that I'm not ready to handle all this information. And then later on in the evening, she went upstairs and she proceeded to make a phone call to her ex-boyfriend, whom was the very source of all of her pain and suffering that she'd been going through. And I could relate to that very easily. And the next morning I woke up and the first thing that I thought was, why do we do that? Why do we constantly go back to that source of pain? And, we could get analytical in so many ways about this, but I decided to take it on more of a natural aspect, more of a look of we're all one, and look at it on evolutionary terms. We evolved from the seed, the nut, the plant, the flower, that we're all one. And the first thing that came to mind was a nut. Every nut in its natural form is within a hard shell, a hard exterior. And what do we need to do to get to that soft, luscious part of that meaty nut? Because we know inside that nut is nourishment. That nut is life. And so you say, well, why do we keep going back to that which causes us harm? Well, that which we perceive to cause us harm is actually the very thing that will crack us open. When we go back to that source of pain, on a 3D level, of course, we go back to that source of pain, and we need that cracking open of the shell, that constant cracking, that heavy hammer to crack us open. And we can meet the greatest of people, and they just look at us as, it's okay, they accept us. But then we wind up being in a cycling pattern. But what do we always go back to? We go back to that source of pain. It's like a magnet back to that source of pain. Well, those people, they can give us hope, and they can talk to us, and they can be very gentle. But nature is not always very gentle. If you look at nature, nature is not gentle. Nature can be very harsh. Nature can be something that we perceive as being very cruel at times, but it's all within a plan. And so you look at a nut, and that nut doesn't have a thought process, but that nut needs to be cracked open in order to have its true flesh revealed. And so we go back to that source of pain, that source of suffering. And in a way, we're saying, please, crack me open, hit me harder and harder. Because the harder you hit, the more chances, the likelihood of you cracking me open is increased. And when you hit me so hard, I will crack open. And I will reveal my insides. But this is the trick. This is the funny thing, is that there is that nut, that meaty part that tastes so good, but it has a bitter exterior. And to someone that just might just get a little glance, a little taste, a little tip of the tongue of that bitterness, that part around the nut that's bitter. Ooh, that's kind of bitter. But after you bite down a couple times, you say, ooh, but then I get the sweetness of the flesh inside. And that is what that person does for you. They crack you open. They taste that bitterness, but they get that sweet. And that's not for everyone's palate. We are not for everyone's palate. And that very person that takes the time to crack you open may not be that person that you actually think is a wonderful person. Maybe, maybe not. But if you think about it for a moment, who is this person that gives me this much pain, this much suffering? That's that person that's going to take the time to crack you open. And I just give you a moment. I ask you, think about it for a little bit. Think about how many times you've been hit and hit, and that hammer has fallen down upon you. Obviously not literally, figuratively. But yet nature has its course, a natural course that it runs. And we don't really judge it. We just say that's nature, it's what it does. But we as humanity, we want to put a judgment on everything. And we don't want to see things in terms of a natural experience. But if we take a moment within our spirituality and we say, why am I drawn to that which causes me so much pain and suffering? It's that nut within that hard exterior shell that needs to be cracked open to expose its vulnerable parts. And we can't do that with someone that's just a kind, gentle soul. Of course, we wish to have those people around us, but it takes that hardened soul. Some may say a narcissist, a sociopath, a psychopath, or maybe someone that's just had a hard life. But you chose that experience. You chose that person that has that heavy hammer that can crack you open to expose your vulnerable parts. And once you are cracked wide open and they taste that bitter taste on their tongue, they may move forward or they may decide to enjoy that delicate, sweet part of you. And they may chew on it for a really long time. And being a human, well, how long do we live? We've got a whole bowl full of nuts for people to partake in. And we may decide that, okay, we've had enough of that person, let's move on to the next. But we can have that bowl full of nuts all day long and keep being cracked open and keep having that vulnerable part exposed. But it's only in that moment when you realize, wait a minute, this person has cracked me open so many times. And the more they crack me open, the more nuts they crack open, the more I continue to see myself. The more I am vulnerable, the more I express myself. The nature, the inherent nature of who I am. And that is why we are all part of nature. I mean, we can equate it to the seed. The apple is so sweet. You eat the apple, you eat all of it. And then once you alleviate yourself in the bathroom, that seed comes out. Well, in nature, the birds, they eat the apple and they relieve themselves. And then within that relief, boom, life is born. But the seed is poisonous. The seed is bitter. Why? They don't want them to eat the very thing that creates life. They want life to continue. So it's the same with us. We want life to continue. We're all that nut. We all want to be cracked open. We're all that apple. We want to be eaten by someone. And we want that which we consider to be waste is actually life. So it's asking yourself, do I judge that which seems to be harsh or unexplainable, or let's just say straight up shit? But sometimes it takes shitting to create life. Sometimes it takes having that heavy mallet cracked over your head, metaphorically speaking, of course, to be cracked open, to expose the truth of who you are, to allow that light to shine forth so that you can see the brightness, the light of who you truly are.